Hi, everyone. We should get started in just a minute.
Hi, CP.
Hello.
A dreary, dreary Tuesday in Baltimore it is.
It is raining here as well. I am calling in today from American University, from my partner's office.
Yeah, it's definitely a crawl in bed sort of day. So happy, but I'm glad you're in the office too. I'm in the office here at FreeState. Hey, Jabari, how's it going?
I'm wonderful. Hi, everybody.
So Jabari, do you want to kick us off and just do a little intro on the sort of legal services that we're working to pull together with Safe Haven HPRP?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about what this program is and what Safe Haven is and all that. I think I would love for a person who is way more versed in talking about the legal services to talk about the legal services piece. But hi, everybody. My name is Jabari Lyles. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Baltimore Safe Haven. We are an organization based in Baltimore City. We provide health and housing services to transgender folks living in survival mode in Baltimore City. We operate a mobile outreach operation, a drop-in center, a transitional housing program, civic engagement, and an incarcerated siblings program. We are so excited to be in partnership today with FreeState Justice and with HPRP to provide our legal support series over the summer. This will be the first installment in a number of info sessions targeted at a whole bunch of legal concerns that folks may have in the community. We will have these webinar-esque events as well as an actual legal clinic where you can sign up for time with an attorney to talk about some of those things. It's been really great working with these really great organizations to provide these really important services. And so happy to be here. Thank you for all who are joining. And then I will pass it off, I suppose, to either Jeremy or CP to talk to Jeremy to say a little bit more.
Thanks, Jabari. So hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Lemaster. I'm the Executive Director for FreeState Justice, a legal services and policy advocacy organization for the state of Maryland, serving the LGBTQ community and really centering our legal services on low-income folks and the issues and challenges they face. So to that extent, I'm really excited to be working in partnership with a number of different groups to kind of pull together a variety of legal services that our community sort of need. So as Jabari said, we'll be going through a series this summer talking about a number of important issue areas and cases that we can support folks on. We'll start today with gender marker name change, but we'll also be looking in the future, not just sort of the providing sort of info sessions on, housing discrimination, employment discrimination, expungement services, et cetera, and sort of continuing to roll out and build out legal services for community members. So I'm going to turn it over to CP. CP Hoffman is our legal director at FreeState Justice. They have been very instrumental in sort of pivoting and adjusting the way in which we sort of provide legal services during a global pandemic. And they also sort of do amazing sort of ongoing policy advocacy work. Most recently, which will be part of the presentation, I won't give too much away, would be sort of the publication waiver for name changes in the state of Maryland. And so I'll definitely let CP focus more on that work. So without further ado, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to turn the floor over to CP. Will be just a few sort of housekeeping notes. Closed captioning is available. You should see a closed captioning icon at the bottom of your bar if you're joining us on the Zoom webinar. If you are on Facebook live or another streaming service. You should also be able to generate or sort of set up closed captioning either automatically or through the program itself in those spaces. So definitely make sure to toggle those on if you need them. Today's event is being recorded and live streamed. We're looking to make sure we're reaching a large group of audiences, but also sort of memorializing the information we're giving out today, so that's more readily available for folks later down the line, especially in those who are looking to navigate the gender marker name change process themselves. To that extent, you are able to sort of raise hands. You're also able to use the Q&A chat box in the bottom to ask questions. Those would allow you to have more anonymous ways of submitting or asking questions. Also, you should have the ability to change your name if you wish to remain anonymous in our sort of attendee list. I'll be monitoring both our Q&A box as well as the chat for questions that come up. I'll just sort of acknowledge when I've seen them, and I may wait for this sort of an opportune time to either peg CP to sort of answer or speak to that question, or we may hold them to the end when we'll have a longer Q&A session and take them up there. So without anything else I'm missing, CP, you think, or Jabari?
I would also add that at the end of this session, we should include the link to sign up for the clinic. And so that's something we can put in the chat, and we'll also make sure to share it on Facebook. But yeah,
Great.
I'm excited.
Thank you. All right, so without further ado, CP Hoffman.
Hi, everyone. I am going to steal the screen share and bring up my slides. And now I'm moving my little picture of myself. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our first of these exciting sessions. Today I'm going to be talking about changing your name and gender marker on identity documents, which we decided was something that was very relevant to the community that Baltimore Safe Haven works with, as well as FreeState Justice's client base. It's one of the largest, by number of requests, it's one of the largest things that we receive from the community each year, people asking us to help them with updating their name and gender marker. So there's a lot of questions about this. And so I'm going to be talking through the process today, sort of explaining what is involved, and providing folks, to the extent that you want to do it yourself, with resources so that you can, so that you can take the lead and get everything done yourself if that's how you want to do it. But also so that if you are doing it with FreeState or with another organization, another legal services organization, that you sort of understand what's involved and why we're asking you different things. So attending this doesn't mean you can't come to FreeState for help through the process. It just is sort of intended here for information and to sort of empower people to make the decision for what's the best choice for themselves. So again, I am CP Hoffman, legal director at FreeState Justice. My pronouns are they, them. So what we're going to do, I have a quick agenda up here. So we're going to I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to talk through what the name and gender change process look like generally. Going to go into the name change process specifically and a lot of stuff involved with that. Dive into what changing your birth certificate is like in Maryland, and then changing your gender marker with other agencies, like on federal documents and such. I will also throughout be hitting on a number of special considerations for non-binary folk, and where non-binary gender markers are and are not available. I ended up integrating that into the various slides, so it's not going to be its own section at the end, just because it made sense to talk about things as we go through, but I forgot to change the slide, sorry. So there's a picture of me, and you can see my name and title and a little bit of information about me, and me looking much better than I do on this Zoom. Now, if you're not familiar with FreeState Justice, I know Jeremy gave a little short spiel about it earlier. We are Maryland's statewide LGBTQ+ advocacy organization, and we engage in advocacy for the LGBTQ community on a number of fronts. The part that I'm most involved with is our direct legal services, where we help transgender individuals get their name and legal gender identity changed. We assist with discrimination on matters that are tied to someone's LGBTQ status. So if someone is, fired from a job because they're gay or trans, or they're denied housing, or I had a client last year who was denied access to a wedding venue because she was part of a same-sex couple. We also assist with LGBTQ-related family law matters, such as like custody issues with trans parents, where their transgender status is at issue in the custody hearing. And then health insurance matters, such as health insurance for trans folks. The second pillar of our work is education and outreach. And here we work with the state governments, county and municipal governments, state agencies, police departments, et cetera, to advocate for policies that help or at least don't hinder the LGBTQ community. And here we've done a lot of work over the years, especially on the state legislative front, pushing for laws that help the community. And then the final pillar of what we do as an organization is education and training, both to members of the community about what your rights are, or what legal issues are that are impacting you, but also other organizations and government agencies and such on how they can provide better services to LGBTQ communities. So I assume that most of the people watching today have a pretty good understanding of, sort of trans issues, since I think most of you are probably trans yourselves. So I'm not going to go through the standard terminology that I often go through of this is what transgender is, and gender identity and blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to give you that, but I did want to go through a few of the kind of legal terms that will be coming up today, so that you kind of have a better understanding of some of the stuff that I'll be talking about. So the first thing that I have up here is your legal name. And I have legal in scare quotes here, because really any name that you use for yourself, as long as it's not for a fraudulent or illegal purpose, is a legal name. But a lot of times, what people mean when they say your legal name is what's written on your driver's license or your birth certificate, or whatever identity document. This will usually be the name that you're changing from. Again, you have a right under the common law in Maryland and in almost every state to use any name you want, as long as it's for a non-fraudulent purpose. But because of legal changes over the years, it's now very difficult to get your identity documents changed if you don't have a court order. So that's why I'm talking you through all this today. So the second thing is preferred name or name of common use. This is the name that you use for yourself in everyday life. Usually it's the name you're changing to. So you're changing from a former legal name or a dead name to your new preferred name or name of common use. Gender marker, this is the designation of sex or gender on an identity document. So where on the license or birth certificate it says M or F, or in some cases X, for non-binary folk. Petition is a document that you file with the court to open a legal case. So I'll be talking about filing a petition in a name change case. And then there'll be other pleadings that go along with those. Pleadings are other documents you file with the court. And then the last thing is administrative gender change. This is a process where you change the gender marker on a document without needing to get a court order. So a lot of the gender marker changes that I'll be talking about, you don't have to get a specific court order to go through that process. You might need to get a letter signed by a physician, or something else. but you don't have to go to court to, you know, get a judge to say, yes, I recognize that, you know, you are, you know, male or female or non-binary or whatever. So that makes it a little bit less awful of a process, I think. But, you know, there may still be some situations where you do have to go to court, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So, you know, sort of, I often start these trainings because a lot of times I'm talking to, you know, pro bono attorneys or people who, you know, it isn't them themselves. I often start by asking, you know, like, why do people want to change their name and gender marker? I assume you all have a very good understanding of why you want to change your own name and gender marker. But I do think it's important to emphasize like that it's crucial to be recognized for like who we are. And even though going through this process can be intimidating and sometimes costly and scary, at the end of the day, you'll have, you know, new identity documents that reflect who you are, that affirm your human dignity and your sense of self, that will help minimize the risk of, you know, something going wrong when you're asked for ID. The example I always give, like in other trainings, is, you know, when like, not necessarily that I'm scared of what like the bouncer at a bar is going to do when I show them my ID, but what the other people around me are going to, you know, think or overhear, and, you know, how they'll react, you know, because someone might be say, you know, oh, is this, you know, is this you? What's going on here? But, you know, the person behind me, like it's, well, like it's the bouncer's job, you know, they kind of know what they're doing, maybe, hopefully, but, you know, the person behind me, who knows what they're doing? So, you know, there really is a risk that every time you show ID that doesn't correspond to who you are, that, you know, you'll be facing, you know, violence or worse. And then also it's really crucial to have ID that matches, you know, your sense of self and your presentation when looking for jobs, housing, etc. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the process looks like. Unfortunately, there is not a like one-stop shop where you can go and just update everything. The processes, you know, are a little bit different for every document, and they're different for changing your name versus updating gender markers, which can make it definitely frustrating. But hopefully, you know, after you sort of watch through this video or this webinar, you know, you'll sort of have a better understanding of how it works, and it won't be quite as scary. So for your name change, if you want to change your name on, you know, your identity documents, you're basically going to have to get a court order recognizing your new name. The good news is that most cases are handled without you having to like go before a judge in a hearing and sort of explain why you change your name or things like that. Most of the time, judges will, you know, rule on just the pleadings before them. So they'll see the petition and they'll see the documents in support of the petition, and they'll say, you know, oh yeah, this is, you know, everything's here, and then they'll stamp it and sign it. In rare instances, there will be hearings. Most of the time, though, those cases are involving like people under 18, where like one parent is opposing the name change or something like that. But yeah, you will have to file stuff with the court. I almost wrote you don't have to go to court, but technically you may physically have to go to the court to drop things off, but you don't have to go in like before a judge, if that sort of distinction is clear. Gender marker changes, on the other hand, every agency has their own rules for updating gender markers. So you need to look at the rules for, you know, the specific document that you're trying to update. Some are, you know, very lenient and easy and accommodating, such as, you know, if you're trying to change your gender on a Maryland driver's license, they're not allowed anymore to ask for evidence of your gender. You just tell them that, you know, you want to change your gender marker, and you pay the fee for a new license, but they're not allowed to ask for documentation. On the other hand, there's, other documents where, you will need, a letter signed by a medical provider, or, if you were born in a state other than Maryland and you're trying to amend the birth certificate from that state, you might possibly need a court order recognizing your gender identity. But I'll sort of talk a little bit about that later. So I'm going to dive into the name change process in a little bit more detail. So I want to just be clear that today I'm just talking about adult name changes. The process is a little bit different for minors under 18. There's some additional things you need to submit, and there's some additional considerations. So if you're looking into, if you're under 18 and you're looking into changing your name, or, if you're watching this on behalf of, your child or something and they're under 18, I suggest reaching out to FreeState Justice and we can talk you through the additional requirements for minors. It's just, it's a little easier to just, in this space, focus on the adult name changes. So for adult name changes, what you have to submit to the court are the petition for the change of name. And there's, for all of these things, or for most of these things, there's court forms that you can use, and that I'm going to link for you once we get a little bit further on, so that you can, have all the resources. Yeah, so you'll have the petition for change of name. It's a pretty simple 2-page form. I'm going to show you the 2 pages in a little bit. The second thing will either be a notice of publication or notice for publication, or a motion for waiver of publication. Now, under Maryland law right now, at the time I'm presenting this, which is June 22nd, 2021, Maryland requires that individuals going through the name change process publish notice of their name change before it's granted. Now, there is a procedure in the court rules where you can ask the court to waive the requirement for publication. And whether the courts waive or not is highly dependent on sort of the practices of local judges in different counties. So, in Baltimore City, judges routinely grant motions to waive publication in name change cases filed by transgender petitioners. In Baltimore County, they routinely reject the motions for waiver. So, in Baltimore City, you might be able to avoid publication, but in Baltimore County, you can't. Similarly, we see the same sort of thing, the same sort of disconnect in like Montgomery County and Prince George's County, down by DC. The good news is that in this past legislative session, there was a new statute passed that requires judges upon request to waive the publication requirement. So it's not in effect yet, but as of October 1st, 2021, if you ask a judge to waive the publication requirement in a name change case, they're required to do so. I have up here that, you're required to, submit the notice for publication or the motion for waiver, but just be aware that these rules are changing soon. The third thing you have to submit is a copy of a birth certificate or another document establishing the current name that you're changing from. So, if you don't have a copy of the birth certificate, it's not a problem. You could submit a copy of your driver's license or state ID, or, some other sort of official document that has that name on it. So, a lot of times people come to us and they're like, oh, I lost my, birth certificate years ago. I don't know where it is. Do I need to order a new one to change my name, only to then have to order a new one again after my name is changed? And the answer is usually no. Like, usually we can use a different identity document. And then the last thing is you'll either submit a filing fee, which if you're representing yourself, will be $165. If you are represented by an attorney, it will either be $175 or $185, depending on which county you're in. or a request for a waiver of prepaid costs. And I have a copy of this waiver request, this request for waiver form in the resources I'm going to be giving you. And basically, it allows you to say, you know, I am low income, you know, this is how much I make, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then the courts will often waive those costs. Now, if you are being represented by Free State Justice or one of the pro bono attorneys in our network, you will generally have that those costs waived by virtue of being represented by us. Like we sort of, we affirm to the court that you're eligible for free legal services, and then they waive those costs. Now, sometimes, and I should mention this now, some counties, and Baltimore County, I think, is the one that's really bad about this. They will waive prepaid costs at the beginning of the case, but then they'll bill you at the end of the case. And so you'll suddenly receive this bill that's like, you know, for the $165, and it's saying, you know, that you owe this money. And sometimes they'll send it out in something that's like past due, you know, second notice or something. And you're like, I never received a first notice. And this has been especially bad over the past year because a lot of their billing systems have been messed up by the pandemic. Now, if you receive one of these, what you need to do is call up the courthouse and tell them that you want to request a waiver of post-paid costs. And generally, you know, there'll be a form that they send you to do that. It's not super onerous. You can say, you know, I had prepaid costs waived, my financial situation is the same, etc. I'm working with the courts to try to get this streamlined so that people don't have to do this two-step process. And most counties don't make you do this two-step process, but Baltimore County is one that often does. So I just want people to be aware that they might get a bill at the back end that they're like, I thought this was waived. And it's just like you have to submit like one final form. Yeah. So this is the petition, the state's form petition for petition of name change. You can, you know, see the first page of it here. There's, you know, page 2 of 2 on the next slide, but it's mostly, you know, pretty straightforward. So at the top, you'll put in, sorry, the light in here has gone, well, it's not coming back on. At the top, you'll put the city or county in which you live. So unless you're in Baltimore City, you'll put the county. If you're in Baltimore City, you'll say Baltimore City. And it is important to note that you're going to file this with the circuit court for the county, not the district court. This can be confusing. The way that the court system is split up, we have both circuit courts and district courts. That's the circuit court that handles name changes. So, you know, if you're trying to remember later when you're like typing, you know, the thing into Google Maps or whatever to take it over to the courthouse, just look at the form to remind yourself, like, oh yeah, the circuit court. And then you'll put your current legal name, you know, so the name you're changing from, your address, your city, state, and zip code, and then the name that you're changing it to. And you'll want to make sure that you include like the full name that you're changing it to. So, you know, if you don't include a middle name, you will not have a middle name after, you know, on your new order. So, you know, sometimes we see people who are like, oh, well, I want to keep my middle name the same. And you just have to include it on this line, because if you leave it out, then it won't be listed on the name change order. And then, you know, like the Motor Vehicle Administration will be like, oh, well, you don't have a middle name. If there's a problem, if like something is messed up, if you misspell something, if the court misspells something, you know, on the final order, etc., we can get it fixed. It's not like a huge problem. Typos, you know, are relatively easy to get fixed. You know, you just have to submit something that says, you know, hey, there was a problem with this. Can I, you know, have it fixed? And usually, you know, it can be done pretty easily. If you don't notice it for, you know, like a year or something, and then you're like, oh, it says that I'm, you know, the fun example from my own, this was not my name change order. This was from my admission to the court in Maryland. But when I was admitted to court, they said that my first name was Charlotte with like 2 E's at the end of Charlotte. And I called them up and I was like, so it's actually just Charlotte. And they're like, yes, it is. And we got that fixed quickly. But if there's an error like that, if you get it fixed quickly, then usually, it's easy. If you wait long enough, the case has been officially closed, you might have to petition to have the case reopened. I'm probably giving you more information than you really need here, but yeah. So a couple of points on this. So question 3, it says, list prior names that you've been known as. And here you only need to use prior legal names. So, if you've gone by nicknames or, you've used, you've sort of wavered between several different, like new names of common use, you're like, well, I know I'm going to be CP, but what is CP going to stand for? Is it going to be Charlotte? Is it going to be, whatever? You can, you don't have to list all these things unless you have like a court order or a marriage certificate or something that has it on it. If it's just something that you've like told your family to start using, you don't have to list it here. The second thing that I wanted to point out on the first page, the last question here, number 4, asks you to state if you've ever been required to register as a sex offender. And if so, like the full name and just the full name, sorry. Now this is something that's required in the rules. And if you don't answer this question, your petition will be sent back to you and they'll say, you need to check a box here. Basically, if you have been registered as a sex offender, it's not going to stop you from changing your name. But there's just some additional things that the court needs to do on the back end in order to notify the sex offender registry that your name has been changed. So again, it's not going to stop anything. And I know it's like a weird question to ask. And like, it's something we have to ask all of our clients who come in. And I always have to preface it with, okay, so this is on the form. And if I don't ask you this, your name change won't go through. But, it's not that like, there's someone in the courthouse who has like some prurient interest and is going to reject things just because of that. Okay, so the second page of this form, question 5, I'm requesting this change of name because here you can just write, this is my name of common use, or this is my preferred name, or something like that. You can write out like, I am a trans person who is, changing my name because I'm trans. But if you do that, then that might be quoted verbatim in like a publication notice or something. So most of the time we just suggest, saying, this is my preferred name, this is my name of common use, something like that. I like this name, it's sweet. Just so that like, you aren't necessarily outed by someone seeing this document. 6, you again write out the new name you want to change it to, make sure it's complete and spelled correctly and all of that. Question 7 creates a process where you can use the same form to obtain a court order recognizing your gender identity. And if you want to do that, then you can fill in the appropriate blanks sort of lower down on the page. They're going to be down here. You'll need to submit additional documentation to the court. The big thing is like an affidavit from a medical provider. And then, for them to grant this. The courts are currently in the process of developing new rules for how they go about all of this. Hopefully it will be a lot easier in the future. If you need to get a court order recognizing your gender identity, reach out to FreeState and we can sort of help you through that process because it can be a little confusing. For most people, you don't need to do this. There are alternatives that are much, much better for most folks. But if you were born in a state that you do need a court order, or if you were born, in another country that requires court order to change your birth certificate or your passport or something, then there might be other circumstances. And then the last note I have here is you need to sign your name. Oh, here it is, petitioner's signature. And the courts require it that it be your current legal name. And this is really ridiculous. And I was having an argument with the courts recently about this, where I was like, you don't mandate the form of someone's signature in other cases. So why are you insisting that their signature, be in the form of their old legal name? And they're like, we don't know, but that's just what we require. So just be sure to sign it in your, former legal name, so that it doesn't get bounced back to you. Again, I hate it. It's just what we're stuck with at the moment. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're filing a name change petition right now, between June and October of 2021, the default rule is that you have to publish notice in a newspaper. It is possible to waive that publication, and now that the law is changing, we're very hopeful that courts are going to start granting a lot more waivers even before October 1st. But depending on your individual circumstances, it may make sense to just move forward with publication to get things done as quickly as possible, for instance. So if you do need to go through the publication process, either because it's what makes sense in your case, or because the court has rejected your petition to waive publication, then you'll need to submit a copy of DR 61, the notice for publication. This is really simple form. You include at the top the same information that was on the petition itself, and then you list your current legal name and the name you want to be known as, and then here you put in the reason you're changing your name. This should be the same reason you put as your answer to question 5 on DR 60. So I'm requesting this change of name because it's my name of common use, it's my preferred name. So you'll fill out up to this point, and then the bottom part will be done by the court, and then they'll send it on to the newspaper to be published. If you do have to go through the publication process, when you take everything into the courthouse, I would advise asking the clerk exactly how the process works for your county, because some counties will forward everything to the newspaper, and then the newspaper will send the notice of publication back to the court. Some counties, the newspapers send the notice of publication to you, and then you have to take it back to the court. And then, some just sort of do their own things, and it's really weird. So ask the clerk, and they'll help clarify how it works in your county. There are enough counties in Maryland that I can't really go through everything right now. But that's sort of the general process. I will say that one of the big issues we've seen in a lot of cases is, someone goes through publication, and then the newspaper, invoices them for the cost, and you pay, and then, you paid them for the fee, which can be between $40 and $150, depending on where you are and what the paper is. And then they just don't send on that certificate of publication to the court. And you can spend so much time just calling up people at the paper, hey, can you send this over? And they're like, yeah, I'm gonna get right on that. And then they don't. And I've dealt with this so many times, and it's so frustrating. So I'm just so glad that soon all of this will be a thing of the past. Now, this is a brand spanking new form. It is DR 113. It was just introduced in March. And it's for the first time the courts have a specific, form to ask for a waiver of publication. So, if you're wanting to avoid publication, and I assume most of you will want to avoid publication, this will be the form you'll use. Again, it's going to be in the packet for you. So, here you'll list your, your current legal name, the name you want to be known as, and then in this box here, you'll say why you don't want it to be published. I would recommend, it's a small box. There's not a lot of space there, but I would recommend, sort of including any personal reasons why you don't want it to be published, or at least until October 1st. Until October 1st, include any sort of personal reasons as to why you don't want it published. Like I've experienced interpersonal violence from my family, and I'm worried that, if they see this, that they're going to, be violent against me again, or, I'm currently applying for jobs and, I'm worried this will, affect that or something like that, whatever individual circumstance you have. And then sort of, note that you're trans. And then I would also, sort of recommend that you include some sort of reference to the new statute that is coming into effect on October 1st, even before October 1st. If you're filing this tomorrow, June 23rd, I would still say reference this bill because, it's now Maryland law. And you can say that the legislature has made clear that they want publication to be waived. Almost all laws in Maryland go into effect on October 1st each year. So it's not like the legislature made a decision that like, oh, there needs to be a period of, 5 months where, the courts can figure out how to deal with this. No, it's just October 1st is just the default day it goes into effect. So there's no reason the courts can't start implementing it before that. Again, I've told this directly to members of the judiciary, and they largely agree with me, but depending on who reviews your case, they may or may not. Now, if they reject your motion to waive publication, you can either go forward with publication, or you can just wait until October 1st and file another motion to waive publication, and then they'll have to grant it. So, that obviously adds time to things, and there's a lot of people who don't have that time to wait because, of one reason or another. But if you're a little less pressed, to get this done, then waiting until October 1st, to ask again for a waiver might be a good option for you. So I already talked through a lot of the publication next steps earlier. So most counties will forward the signed copy of the notice for publication to the newspaper, but some will give it back to you and then you'll have to give it to the paper. So again, ask a clerk. Once publication happens, most newspapers will send the certificate of publication to you. Some will send it directly to the court, ask the court, and they'll verify what their process is. If for whatever reason they do not send it to you or to the court and you're just like fighting with them for months, you have the ability to make your own certificate of publication. I've included the form for this in the packet. So I recommend that you try to make sure you buy a copy of the paper that it's published in the day that it's published, so that you have the you can just cut out a copy of the notice and post it in. If you aren't able to do that, then we have had situations where we've just provided other documentation, like here's the the invoice and the proof that we paid it, and communications about this and stuff, and that's worked. It's just sort of frustrating. And then I already hit on what to do if your waiver is denied. Now you also can potentially ask the court to seal your case so that it's not publicly searchable. And there's sort of two ways they can do this. One is they can seal it for all purposes, so that if someone wants to look at your the records relating to your case, they have to get a court order allowing them to do so. The other is that it can be shielded from the online judiciary case search website. But like if someone went into the courthouse itself, that they could view the documents there. Now, a lot of trans people, for very good reason, have concerns about their cases being publicly searchable on the judiciary's website, and things ending up in on Google. Now, I will say that as of right now, the way that the judiciary's website is set up, like the cases there do not just show up from Google. So like if you Google me, it won't lead you to my name change case itself. But if you sort of take the extra step of going to the judiciary website and then typing in my former name, then you would find me and find my case. That said, there is definitely a concern with some newspapers where publication would be online, and then we've had people who their first Google search result is the notice of publication, despite having like lots of other things about them. So depending on your circumstances, sealing your case may or may not be a good idea. It can sometimes make things take longer, especially in some of the busier courts. So like in Baltimore City, for instance, there's basically one person on the staff who handles all of the cases that are sealed. And so it acts as this like choke point, and can often delay name change cases. So in some cases like that, we've suggested waiting until the back end of the case to ask for it to be sealed, in order to sort of allow things to proceed, and then get it sealed after you have that court order. Other times, if a case is sealed, it can make it more difficult to get copies of things later. The sealing orders are all, they all say like, sealed to everyone except for the parties and their attorneys. But we've still had, county clerks' offices like insist that we had to get a new court order in order to open up or to unseal a case that, we just needed a new copy of the order for. And that's been, we've seen a lot of these issues of like people needing to get a copy of their, order from several years ago recently, because of everyone trying to comply with like the Real ID Act requirements. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, I changed this years ago, and they changed all their documents. But then, when they're going to get a Real ID compliant license for the first time, they discover that they also need to have a copy of their court order, and they, have lost it in the meantime. I will say that, getting back to sealing, I will say that courts are very inconsistent in when they seal name change cases. And some courts will require additional forms or, very stringent evidence. So, you should be aware that the court may send you additional documents that you need to fill out. Also, they provide very little space here. So, the specific facts why these records should be prevented or limited from public inspection are, and then they give you 2 lines. Like, if you just write out stuff on 2 lines, it's probably not going to be enough for most courts to say, granted. They'll ask for more information. So, consider, writing in like see attached page, and then, explaining on a second page, why you want the case to be sealed. And again, talk about, the risk of violence, to trans people, heightened discrimination, any personal circumstances, et cetera. So once your name change is granted, now what? So you can, once you get the court order from, or once you get the order from the court, you can use that to change your name on identity documents. Now, I will say, I did not write this here, but I will say that the absolute first thing you should do is look at it and make sure that everything's spelled correctly. We have a lot of situations where, the former legal name or the new legal name or, something else on the document is misspelled. And often it's like someone in the clerk's office just doing a typo, or there was one case I had where they literally like copied and pasted like someone else's form. And so it had like a completely unrelated name that they were changing from. And so, you wouldn't be able to use that order for anything, unless like someone with the other name suddenly decided they wanted that name too. So, look at the order, make sure it's correct. And if it's not, then, contact FreeState, contact the clerk, something, and we can make sure that you get a corrected order. Generally, most counties in Maryland will send what they call a true test copy rather than a certified copy. It will be like hand stamped as a true test copy, and there'll be a signature on it, but it won't have like a foil seal that's like raised and, sort of embossed. For most documents, the true test copy should be sufficient for updating things, but there may be some things that, when you take it in, they say, oh, we need to have a certified copy. If that's the case, then you just need to call up the clerk's office and order a certified copy. Typically, it'll be like $5 to $10. It shouldn't, it's not a huge additional cost. It's just really frustrating if they don't send them out as default now. But for most things, the true test copy should be sufficient. All of my documents I was able to update with my true test copy, so it hasn't been an issue, but I do know that sometimes people do have problems. I will note, though, that you should take the original document with you, or mail the original document in if you're doing something by mail, rather than a photocopy, because they will not accept photocopies for most things. Once you have your court order, you can then use it to update your identity documents, but it's important to note a couple of things. One is that you generally need to start with the Social Security Administration before you can change your name on your license or state ID, or with some like banks or financial institutions. And then also, my bank, for instance, required that I update my license before they would update my my bank records. There was no legal requirement for that. It was just their policy. So I had to wait until I had a new license. So here I sort of have a little chart that shows that you can use a court order to immediately change your birth certificate or your name on your passport. But to change your driver's license or state ID, you first have to go through, the Social Security Administration and update your name with them. And the reason for that is that the Motor Vehicle Administration cross-checks everything against the Social Security database to ensure that people are like citizens, that they're like not committing identity fraud, et cetera, et cetera. And so if your name doesn't match with the Social Security system, then it'll be flagged and they won't give you a license. So again, you just have to go through this process first. It's irritating, but it's ultimately for the best, because you'll want to update the Social Security stuff anyway, because anytime that you are applying for employment or having employment eligibility checked, you'll want to make sure that Social Security has your current legal name that you're using and that you're giving employers. Because if your employer does a check against the Social Security database and it's a different name, then that'll like ping as a potential employment issue. So you'll definitely want to update your name with Social Security, even if it's it seems like lower priority than like getting a license with your name on it. Also, you can update your Social Security card doesn't list a gender on it, but the Social Security Administration database does track gender. So it generally, in most cases, it's a good idea to update your gender with Social Security at the same time that you're changing your name with them. Now, yeah, here we go. In a second to talk about it, but I'm just going to talk through this really fast. So you can update your gender with Social Security with a variety of different things. You could use a court order recognizing your gender. You can submit an updated passport or state-issued birth certificate, or you can submit a signed letter from a medical provider affirming that you've received treatment for gender transition. Now, there's a template of this letter in the resources, so you can use that. But for the most part, like, this is one of those frustrating things where if you could do things in a different order, I would say, oh, go get your, change your name with the MVA and then get your birth certificate updated, and then update your Social Security with the birth certificates that you don't have to, get a separate letter. But because you can't do the MVA part until after you have the Social Security part done, this like updated state issued birth certificate part is not as useful as it could be, which is really frustrating. And I don't want anyone to have to like go to Social Security twice, because like if you have to physically go, there's like a hellish long line and it's unpleasant. You can also mail things into them and they'll mail you back a card. But it can take a while, and everything is just disrupted by the pandemic. Still, it's frustrating. When you do go into the SSA, or when you get to the stage, I highly recommend checking their website to figure out whether your local office is physically open, whether they're taking appointments online, or whether you need to mail things into the national office. I will note that currently Social Security cards or the Social Security database only recognizes binary genders. So you can only be listed as male or female in their database. There's a lot of advocacy ongoing to get this changed, and hopefully it'll be changed in the next year or so, but there's not really any promise here that, I can't give you a time frame of what will happen or a surety that it will change. It's just, we're trying to get it changed. So if you are non-binary, you should consider, you have the option of leaving your gender marker as it is, whatever was assigned at birth, or you can change it to the other binary gender marker. And, depending on your individual circumstances, one or the other choice might be right for you. But it's not a problem if you have some documents that say M, some documents that say F, and some documents that say X. That actually is a reasonably common situation for non-binary folk. So going back to the form, it's this simple one-page application for Social Security card. Now, you very likely already have a Social Security card, but you just use this application anyway. And you will, just write in the new information, and you'll either, you'll take in, so name to be shown on card will be the name you're changing it to, full name at birth, if other than above, and then you'll have like your name at birth, and then if other names have been used in the meantime, you'll list it here. And then, your gender marker, you'll just check whichever box here. For the gender marker, again, you'll need to submit evidence beyond the court order with your name change, unless it's a combined court order that also recognizes your gender identity. Now, the great news about Maryland licenses is that they can't ask for proof of your gender. Since 2019, Maryland has adopted self-attestation of gender for licenses and state IDs. So you just go to the MVA and you tell them you want a new license. you need a corrected license with a different gender marker, and you pay a $20 fee. And they give you there's like a touch screen that you physically select which gender you want. And the options you have are male, female, or unspecified or other. And unspecified or other is the one that will get you an X marker on your license, which is what a lot of non-binary folk like. Or at least use as a next best substitute. At the same time you're doing that, you should take in that court order with your name change, so that you can get your name changed on your license also. Again, if you can do these things at the same time, it saves you, trips to the MVA and saves you having to pay that $20 fee multiple times. Depending on when you're doing this process, I highly recommend checking with the MVA website and making an appointment ahead of time. I think right now, all of the MVA offices are still by appointment only because of the pandemic. So you'll need to make an appointment for a license renewal or a license correction. I also highly advise that you go through their online tool to determine if you already have a Maryland license or state ID, that you go through their tool to determine if it's Real ID Act compliant. If it's not, then you might need to bring in additional documents to prove your identity or to prove citizenship. It's a really frustrating process if you do have to do that. If you've already done it, then it makes it a lot easier. And then updating your Maryland birth certificate. If you're just changing your name, there's a different form. But if you're also updating your gender marker on your birth certificate, you'll use this form, which is application for change in sex designation on a certificate of live birth. You can also use this to change your name at the same time. So, it's just easier to do this. It's a 2-page form. It's reasonably easy. The only problem is that unlike the birth certificates, unlike the licenses and state ID, it's not self-attestation. So you have to offer some sort of proof that you've transitioned. Again, working to change that, but at present, that's the situation. So you can either submit a court order recognizing your gender identity, or a form, the second page of the form, filled out by a medical provider. So this first page is pretty straightforward. So you list your current name, contact information. Your current name will be like the name you're using now. So, if you're changing it to something, you would put the name that you've changed it to here. And the name at birth would be the former legal name. Date of birth, the name of your parents. I should talk to them about getting this form changed, actually, because of the mother and father language. And then you should generally check both of these boxes to say that you want the name on your birth certificate changed, and also that they issue you a new certificate of birth. Because if you don't check the second box and you only pay $10 down here instead of $20, then they will change it in their records but not send it to you, which is not the most useful thing. So check both the boxes, sign, and then say $10 for preparation, and then $10 for the certified copy, for a total of $20. It's ridiculous. I don't know why they did the form this way. It's just what we have. Now, the second page will be done by your medical provider. And here it can be signed by a physician, psychologist, nurse practitioner, or licensed clinical social worker. The big group that cannot sign these are physician assistants. So if your primary provider for transition-related care is a PA, which is especially likely to be the case if you receive care through Chase Brexton, then you'll need to. They usually just have their supervising physician sign it, but it might be signed by someone other than the person that regularly sees you. Now, currently, they unfortunately only allow binary gender options for these. Now, I have been assured on multiple occasions that they are in the process of updating their computer system, and that in early 2022, the Department of Health system will be changed so that they will have a third gender option. Until then, you just have to have either male or female. So I'm sorry. Now, if you have a US passport that you want to update, the process here is either not super irritating if you're just changing your name, or awful if you're also changing your gender. If you're just changing your name, you can use the form DS-82, which is like the the passport renewal application. And there you just send in like, a copy. You send in your current passport, you send in a recent photograph, you send in a copy of your name change order, and then the fee. And then they send you back a new passport. If, on the other hand, you are also changing your gender marker on your passport, their current rules are awful and basically require you to apply for a new passport using form DS-11, which is like the application for a passport. And you'll be required to submit proof of citizenship, proof of identity that you have to provide a photocopy of, both front and back. You'll need like a color photograph, you'll need a court order with your name change. And then they also require a letter from a physician confirming gender transition. And they have been extremely particular with the form that these letters take in recent years. It's hopefully getting better under the Biden administration than it was under the Trump administration, but there were many applications for passports rejected for like slight deviation from like the form letter that the Department of State had put out. So you're just encouraged to ensure that your provider is following that template as closely as possible. And then if you're going through this process, you have to not just pay the application fee, but also a $35 execution fee, because you have to have it executed at either a post office or other passport agency. Currently, the passport only has binary gender options. Again, there's been actually extended litigation over this that the Department of State has mostly lost. So hopefully this will change very, very soon. And then nearing the end of all of this, I know I'm going through a lot of stuff, and I know probably a lot of you have questions, so we'll get to this soon. Sort of the other thing that people want to update frequently is like bank records, get a new debit card with their new legal name, etc. Every institution has different rules, so check with their specific requirements. Often they'll not do it until you have your new license or state ID. And then many banks will not update your name until after your Social Security record has been updated, because they do cross checks in the background for various fraud related things and crime prevention and various stuff. But again, you'll just need to check with your individual bank, your landlord, whatever it is you're trying to update, they all have different processes. And then sort of the last point that I have is, if you're looking to update your health insurance, depending on your health insurance company, you might do it directly with them, you might do it with your employer. Changing your name is often reasonably easy, at least for like employer-based programs. I will say that I have heard horror stories about people trying to update their name on the Maryland healthcare exchange, especially when they're trying to change their first name. Their system is built around the assumption that people only change their last names. And so it can be very onerous to get that fixed. So, just sort of understand going in. Also, it's really important here to note that there might be situations where you don't want to update your gender marker with your insurance company, even if you're updating it everywhere else. Legally, insurance companies are required to provide care to people regardless of what their gender marker is when they otherwise cover that care. So if the insurance plan covers gynecological care, which basically all insurance plans do under the Affordable Care Act, it can't exclude it for people with a male gender marker because you're eligible for the care. But that said, there's a huge issue with insurance companies and with doctors not knowing what to bill things as, where they'll routinely reject coverage for especially gynecological care for people with M gender markers. So there's a lot of transmasculine folk who decide not to update their health insurance gender marker because it's just easier to not deal with the constant wrangling with the insurance company over various things. You see this to a lesser extent with trans women and trans feminine people, but sometimes it'll be like you'll see care for like prostate cancer rejected or something. Like, oh, why is this woman applying for benefits for prostate cancer? But it's less of an issue than it is for trans men. So that is the presentation. Now I am going to post into the chat now that I'm closing this. I am going to put a few things into the chat for you. The first is a Google Drive link with a few folders in it that have all of the templates that you'll need to go. Actually, let's see if I can chat to everyone. Oh, there we go. I can chat to everyone. Okay, there we go. So this Google Drive link has a few folders with all the forms you'll need for the name change process, updating your Social Security record, etc. And then there's a few other things in there that will help walk you through processes. The second thing in this is, if I have not been entirely coherent, this is the link to the Maryland court system's name change for adults page that has, again, links to all the forms and a video that you can watch that's like, here's what the process is like and stuff. It's not quite as like trans focused as this presentation has been, but it's definitely a lot shorter. And the last thing, if you were born somewhere other than Maryland, and you need to know what the requirements are for updating your birth certificate are, or you need to know like what you have to do to update some other sort of document that I didn't talk about today, this is a link to the National Center for Trans Equality's Identity Documents Center, where they have information about like all 50 states and various territories, and they also have information about federal documents. So I think they have information there, for instance, about updating military records and stuff that I didn't get to today because it's not quite as relevant to everyone. So I recommend checking out those 3 resources. Yeah, so I know this is a lot, and I know it's probably like, I will say that this is, as legal things go, it's actually a relatively simple process. But even a relatively simple process, like when it comes to the law, can be very intimidating. So, if you've sort of sat through this and you're like, I'm still lost, I have no idea what's going on, contact FreeState, contact Baltimore Safe Haven, contact the Homeless Persons Representation Project. We can help get you set up with depending on your income, potentially free legal services to help you through this process, so that you have someone there advocating for you through it and helping you out with all of it. We have if you're watching this live, the next Tuesday, which will be June 29th, we are having a virtual clinic through Baltimore Safe Haven. So feel free to sign up for that, so that you can come and use that as an opportunity to get signed up for legal services to help with your name and gender change. If you're watching it at any other time, or if just next Tuesday doesn't work for you, you can reach out to FreeState directly. I'm going to share my screen again so that you can see our number. There we go. There's our number. There's also my email address, or you can email info@freestate-justice.org, or intake@freestate-justice.org. We can get you scheduled for an intake. There's also an intake request form on our website. Oh, there we go. Jeremy has just shared the sign up for next Tuesday's event in the chat. So that is my long spiel. It looks like we have at least a couple of questions here.
Yes, I think there was one that we had. I was kind of holding till the end,
Okay.
Just on, the COVID sort of related implications of sort of physically traveling, about gender marker on passports, or if it was just the same. Sorry, let me actually read it verbatim clearly for the audience so that they can know what the question is. So because of COVID, for traveling physically in the future, but if you want to file for it now, is there any news about the gender marker on passports, or is it still the same that you just only be male, female for your passport, but it won't match your ID if it has been changed?
Yeah, so they have not yet implemented X markers on passports. And the hope is that it's going to happen in the next few months or the next year. Again, the State Department has largely lost litigation on this front. And they were under the Trump administration, fighting it kind of pointlessly. But the hope is that, now that we have a new administration, they're going to just sort of say, hey, we lost this case. It's a great time to change this policy. It hasn't happened quite yet. There's a lot of things going on in the background that, first off, I'm not privy to, and that the people who are privy to them can't necessarily talk about. But I know that this is an area where there's a lot of active stuff happening. But if you need a passport in the short term, either getting an M or an F are your options, and it's not a problem if it doesn't match your other ID. Again, you can collect all three.
Great, thanks for that. The next question was actually more of information share from Sam Williamson from HPRP. Did you cover this in the presentation about?
I did not talk about the Dropbox.
Great. So Baltimore City Social Security Administration now has a Dropbox where you can drop off documents on Wednesdays from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. They'll still you'll still have to mail the documents back to you. So thank you, Sam, for providing that additional information. And
that's a good. That's a lot less scary than physically putting your license and a envelope to mail to them. Now, depending on who it is at the Social Security Administration, they frequently will accept the name change order as proof of identity, and you don't have to physically mail them your license. I would still send them a copy of your license. But they can be. It just depends who you get, because they can be weird. But yeah, having the physical Dropbox that you're not relying on the mail twice is really good. But again, just check with your local office, because depending on where you live, it may be different.
Mm-hmm. So then the next one was just about posting the materials again. So CP, do you want to talk a little bit about So I'll say that after this event, we'll definitely be sort of emailing folks out, both with the recording as well as the links and materials we're sharing here. I do know that we're going through a website sort of redesign and reconfiguration, so there will be a space for folks to access these resources on our website in the near future. CP, was there anything else to kind of share in terms of the, being able to access the resources you've been covering?
Yeah, if you can't access them, contact us and I'll make sure you get the link. I just posted it again in the chat. Can we maybe post that on the Facebook thing also?
Yes, I'm trying to, I wish I was a social media expert. I'm trying to
But
re-navigate.
yeah, it's been a goal of mine to get a very comprehensive like identity documents for Maryland page up on our website that links to all of this stuff. And it hasn't happened yet for a variety of reasons. The big one being that like I'm the one who has to do it, and I have a lot of other stuff I have to do also. So hopefully it will be done soon. But until then, I wanted to make sure people have access to these materials.
Great. And I am posting them into the Facebook chat. I'm just going to check to see if there are other comments. So I don't see any other questions in the Zoom room. So I'm going to zoom out to our Facebook stream just to kind of check to see if folks have had questions there. So I'm going to click to expand. I'm just going to check to see if there are other comments.
Oh, Sam also is saying that the Calendly link for signing up with an attorney seems to be cut off and attendees can't put anything in the chat. So can we repost that?
Yes, I'll repost it. I had turned off this volume as I was moving into the sign up link, so I'll go grab that. All right, so while I do that, any other kind of parting words of wisdom, CP?
I would just say like this process can seem very intimidating and scary, but it's important to understand going in that like you're not going to have a judge who rejects your name or rejects your gender, and if they do, then like they're gonna have some problems on their hand very soon. Like it's not like you aren't going to have to like defend your legitimacy in front of the courts in the way that I'm sure a lot of you are probably worried about, and that I certainly was worried about, going into the process myself, because it's something I've done myself, and I've done it for myself, and I've done it for clients, and so it can be scary, but it's not that bad once you're actually in it, and the biggest thing that like kept me from doing it for a long time was just deciding what the hell CP stood for. And then once I did that, I got through the process reasonably quickly. So don't be scared, and feel free to reach out to us for help, and we can help you through the process, and whether that's we represent you through the process, or we just answer some questions so you can represent yourself. We're happy to help out either.
Yeah, I've definitely seen the benefit, CP, that you and the other attorneys provide, and just really talking through the process and kind of analyzing sort of the ramifications, because there's a lot of things for folks to consider. And I think that we've sort of even seen just in our case practice of the kind of rippling out that these things can have, and then sort of it's not just sort of these identity documents. There's a lot of other things that identify us in our lives that like other licenses and things like that, right? And so if you need just someone to talk through and think through and have a sounding board, that's sort of what our team is here for as well. You're always able to kind of we definitely have a number of clients who kind of pause, need to think about, sit on things, and then come back to us at later dates and times in different spaces, right? So, we're always kind of here to try to accommodate, your own pace and journey through it. So,
Absolutely.
all right, so we will definitely be following up for those that registered on Zoom with emails, with both the recording of the event, with the links to the documents. We'll also be kind of following up with a comprehensive post on our website and, in our sort of Facebook as well. For those of you that were watching on the stream, there is a link to sort of register for our future info sessions. And so definitely kind of look forward to, other organizations who will be kind of coming in and talking about legal services that could be a particular use for the LGBTQ plus community across the state. So, all right. Thanks again, CP.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of this dreary day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.